Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, kushalmehra. All right, today's discussion is titled The Truth About Aurangzeb. And to discuss that, I have with me Aditya Kuvalekar. Aditya, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Kushal.
So, Aditya, before we get into the discussion on Aurangzeb, I'll request you, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I am Aditya Kuvalekar. I'm a lecturer at the University of Essex in the UK. I am a lecturer in economics, so I'm not a historian by training, but I am passionate about history. So for living, I teach and do a bit of research in economics. And as a passion, I read history and learn from people about history and occasionally try to write something about it.
So, Aditya, obviously, today's podcast was a direct result of a beautiful essay that you co-wrote with Kedar Falke, you know, in the Open magazine, which was titled "The Truth About Aurangzeb Was the Mughal Emperor a Fanatic." Now, Aditya, I have to start with this question because in the beginning of the essay, there's a very interesting. I don't know how to say um, line that you say that you both of you use Richard M. Eaton and his thesis or his hypothesis as the subject of analysis. And I have to start with this. I know otherwise it's unfair. I think, in my opinion, at least in my brain, I think it's unfair. So let's go like this. Why did you guys choose Richard Eaton? And maybe, somebody might come back to you guys and say, oh, why not any other research? Let's say Audrey.
So now that's a good question. So first of all, I think purely from a scholarship perspective, Eaton's work appears long before Audrey's. But more importantly, I think a lot of people have written about Aurangzeb uh, in different forms. We wanted to focus on somewhat scholarly and somewhat serious work, so we decided to go with Eaton.
All right. So it's obviously so when it comes to maybe considering the work on Aurangzeb, you guys considered Eaton. Now, here's the thing, Aditya. Let's first, before we get into the nitty gritties of the essays and that. Now, when one does an analysis of a subject, and history is also another one of those that involves going back, looking at resources, reading material. Now, here's the thing, Aditya. How does one decipher? So, my first question to you is, when you were researching, and I mean, obviously, you and Kedar both, but this is more like a general subject. So, when one does an analysis of a subject, how do you go about? What's your preparation? That let's first understand. So, how did you guys prepare for the subject? It's an essay you're writing. You want to focus on Aurangzeb, which is a very specific personality. So what was the process where you were like, okay, I want to focus on these books and this material, and then I'm going to go from point A to point B? How did you guys go about doing that?
So, I mean, this piece, in some sense, is a work, I would say, of several years, in the sense um, that I had written for a different portal a piece a few years ago on Aurangzeb, which was not as well researched as this one. And I mean, Kedar is an insanely knowledgeable historian. I mean, he is quite renowned actually in Maharashtra. He speaks mostly in Marathi, so probably your audience uh, may not have heard about him, but I mean, he's an walking, talking encyclopedia. And um, I was introduced to him by actually Dr. Uday Kulkarni, the author of several books on history, Solstice at Panipat, to recently the Maratha Century. So we got talking, and then coincidentally, it so happened that recently again these attempts were revived of glorify may not be glorifying, but sort of saying that Aurangzeb's demolitions of temples. So like at this point, that he demolished temples seems nearly uncontested. So now, then the new trend has been to then give a political color to it. When I say give a political color, I'm obviously saying that I vehemently disagree with that argument. But that was the argument, that the motive were largely political. Now, when you hear or see such positions, and actually, so this goes back to the earlier question you asked about Eaton. So Eaton has a famous paper in the so what, let me just look up the journal. It's Journal of Islamic Studies from September 2000, where temple desecrations and Indo-Muslim states. Now, I had read that paper reasonably carefully a few years ago, and I reread it, and I felt that that needed to be countered, at least in the case of Aurangzeb. So then the process was Kedar and I spoke, and Kedar obviously knew a lot of things inside out. I had some things prepared from my old piece, so we merged things together. I learned more from Kedar. He basically helped me, like guided me to read more material, and then that's how the piece came about.
All right. So now in the piece, it's very interesting. So you guys have focused on three parts, right? So obviously we'll
Mhm.
discuss all the three parts, but just for the benefit of our, viewers or listeners, I just wanted to say, so the first part is you guys focus on why Aurangzeb, kind of demolished temples or whatever the political calculations, or whether it was religious iconoclasm or what it was not. The next was the number of temples itself that are claimed to be demolished, and the third is the historians, and that's about the resources. So let's now
Mhm.
focus on you know this subject, point number one itself. Now this is something very interesting, Aditya. So when we talk about you know political calculations, that word itself, let's
Mhm.
latch on to that first. Now
Yeah.
I have never gotten this the entire I don't know, no, entire, I don't know if I should use uh like scholarship as the word, or I don't know what word should I use when I say this, but look, I'm trying to be as fair as possible, so I'll use the word scholarship. This whole thing that oh, you have to look at it from a certain prism, and that prism is always, there are no religious motives involved, it is always political. And so let's first try and because I think it's the duty of any discussion to first steelman an argument. So, Aditya, can we first start by saying what is the argument itself when we talk about this political inclination? So, could you explain to the listeners and the viewers what exactly is their argument when they say on this temple destruction and the motive of temple destruction?
Sure. So Eaton in his paper argued, and I'm sure he was not the last one, or first one, that that medieval India or early modern India, whichever way you call it, uh, was obviously a place full of conflicts. There were wars, kings were fighting against each other, and there were constant um, churning of power. And the argument goes, so it's actually, to be fair to Eaton, I mean, it's a bit subtle, like an argument that he has made, because what he has said is, at a high level, is that temples were places of religious act, were places of economic importance as well. Like often kings would give patronage to local temples, and they would, the deity would be viewed as someone who is blessing the king, and so on. And therefore, when in times of war, say one king wins against the other, then the victorious king would have um, a tendency to desecrate the place of worship for a for the of the losing king, to sort of assert his power, and also to destroy that place of worship, because that was also motives of wars are often economic. uh, Perhaps here I could be biased as an economist, but I agree with this position that economic motives are very important. So this is the thing now, but he doesn't stop at that. So I'll take a bit of time in explaining in totality, because a natural question then would be that, sure, if you are someone who thinks that religious motives were more important than political, then you would say, okay, in that case, you should see when a Hindu king, let's say, defeats a Muslim king, you should see Hindu kings destroying mosques, number one, if the motives were political. Like, if you just wanted, if sort of the rule of thumb was to destroy a place of worship close to the losing king, then you should see this way argument, like destructions happening this way also. And importantly, you should also see between two Muslim rulers and between two Hindu rulers, correspondingly places of worship being desecrated. And if you look at the evidence, it does not seem that Hindu rulers have destroyed mosques after winning wars, or between two Hindu kings they have destroyed each other's temples. So that is so to this, Eaton's argument is that like, while the Hindu rulers haven't destroyed temples, they have looted each other's temples, and mosques were actually quite separate from the rulers, like the king itself, and therefore mosques were not susceptible to violence in times of war. This is the position that Eaton and all have. Uh, so uh, so I'm coming back to your question, that the political motive argument is this, that the reason why you see that a lot of temples being destroyed in medieval India is precisely because there were wars where Hindus were losing often, and since the motives were political, as a byproduct, their temples were also being destroyed. This is their position.
Yeah, but this is very interesting, right? As if, see, we can never deny there are political motives in anything. I think that would be naive. But the classic adage would be that while political motives might be in some cases a necessary condition, but it definitely is not a sufficient condition, right, Aditya?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, at this is, I view that this is a very extreme position to say that it was entirely political and almost nothing about religious. And I mean, like, it's not like they have. So there is actually, where do I start? But I mean, there is some work. Uh, so first of all, Eaton, when he takes this position that most of the demolitions were political, uh, how many demolitions is he looking at? I mean, he during Aurangzeb's time, Eaton's paper. I highly encourage the readers of this show to read that paper, just to see what what people like Eaton and all are saying. I mean, in Aurangzeb's time, he has, I think, if I remember correctly, less than a dozen temples destroyed. Is the claim in the paper.
Mhm.
Now, I it's to me it's just false. But once you have reduced the number to 10 temple desecrations, let's say, and then you find subsequent, like, coincidental wars around those destructions, then you can always create a story that these wars were the reason. So I don't think that the world is as binary as that, as you said, that it's nobody will deny that there would be, like, when Aurangzeb was ruling, let's say, from Delhi, was there not a single temple in Delhi? Of course, he would have allowed some temples to be there in Delhi, but the question really is of relative importance. What was it? And that, in my mind, does not is not a particularly ambiguous thing. And at this point, I want to clarify one thing, since this is, like, these taking any position on this issue can be very costly. So I have clarified this also in the we have clarified this in the piece, that whatever Aurangzeb did, whichever you think was the motive, we do not think that this has any bearing on the modern Indian or any Muslims. Like, they have nothing to defend or agree or disagree with. So I think this false equivalence, where if you criticize Aurangzeb, somehow it's a critique uh, of today's Muslims. I think that equivalence has to be broken down for us to seriously analyze Aurangzeb just as himself, without getting muddled in any contemporary politics.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. And I find this entire line of argumentation actually very hilarious, Aditya. And I'll explain why. I've always said this many times on other shows and on this show also. Imagine, there is absolute agreement that the British did bad things to us in India in almost all academic circles. It's not like, today some British citizen comes to India, we're going to be, hey, idhar aa, tune aise kyun kiya mere sath? No, we don't do that to Britishers now. So why is this direct assumption that because, somebody who happened to be Muslim by religion who came here, and yes, there was a religious element involved in whatever was happening in the past, we're going to blame the people today who have just happened to be in the same religion for that? I think it is a very condescending view towards the Hindus and other non-Muslim religions in India, that we are such dunderheads that we will take it out on them. I think I find it very condescending if somebody tells me that I am literally going to think like that. I find it insulting to my intelligence. And secondly, yeah, what are we doing? I mean, see, denialism does not help things, right? In a very weird way, Aditya, if we really wanted genuine truth and reconciliation in India, the best way for truth and reconciliation is having an open discussion about our past, not by denying it, right?
I mean, here the opinion is clearly divided, right? There's one school of thought which has dominated a lot of our historical narrative, which disagrees with this view that history should be told as it was. Their view is that you should present it as they did, because that's, according to them, is a way of maintaining communal harmony. Now, uh, I don't know. So I obviously disagree with that view, but to the extent that, and I agree with you that it's downright. I think it's downright offensive to think that because Aurangzeb did X Y Z, we will take it out on today's Muslims. But it is the view. I mean, it's just they think. I think somewhere they think that where will this end? That is the question in their mind. That fine, today you will not take it out on Aurangzeb, but somebody else might do, and so it's best to just downplay the whole episode. Now, I think the issue with that strategy, though, even if one agrees with that, is that you don't control every channel of information. In the past, you did, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was to some extent possible. But in today's world, I mean, how much are you going to deny? Unless you burn down all the primary evidence. I mean, a lot of stuff that we have quoted in our piece is it comes from primary or like secondary sources, which are basically just quoting primary sources which are there to see for everyone. So when information is as readily available as this, uh, I think it's a completely ridiculous strategy um, to then try to try to control information to this by and think that people will not find out and therefore things will be under control. I mean, then actually the reaction is much worse, because when people find out, they think that they have been cheated for so many years, and then they turn more probably they could turn more extreme. So to that extent, I disagree with the strategy, but I think that's the view.
All right, Aditya, now let's take the bull by the horns. So, part one, which is very important. So, what is the record of Aurangzeb when it comes to, temple demolition? And it's very interesting because let's start from, his farmans or imperial orders. Let's get
Mhm.
into a little bit of historical data, and I would request you, because in the essay you talk about Masiri Alamgiri and many other things. So could you now give us a little bit of actual evidence as to what did he do when it comes to temples and demolition?
Oh, I mean, to to describe what he did, as I said, if I bring Kedar on the show and get him to talk, he can talk for 3 hours. The list is really endless. I mean, so most of our in the piece, what we have mostly focused on comes from Masiri Alamgiri. Now, Masiri Alamgiri is a text, is a sort of a chronicle of Aurangzeb's rule, which was written after he died. So it's not like every farman of Aurangzeb. Farman is, as the name suggests, is a state order. So it's not like every farman of Aurangzeb has made its way to Masiri Alamgiri. So whatever that the author, Saki Mustad Khan, whatever he felt was important, that is what went into Masiri Alamgiri. Now, uh, just yeah. So um, so where did yeah, yeah, I was just looking at one thing. Yeah. Um, so after Aurangzeb sort of established his rule, um, he demolished temples in Varanasi. Now there's a famous order of his where he basically says that it has brought to my notice that people are teaching from false books, and therefore just all the temples in Varanasi should be demolished. And then there is a subsequent part where they were indeed demolished. He demolished the Mathura temple, the Keshav Rai temple, and in fact, I mean, it's a very grotesque display of his intolerance in that he he crushed the idols and brought them and planted under another mosque, so to be trodden upon. Uh, he when he was so in the later part of his life, he was almost fully based in Maharashtra, and he was there he basically because he was occupied with the war in with Marathas. So Shivaji passed away in 1680, but the war continued forever. I mean, Aurangzeb also died in Maharashtra, and during that war, he demolished the temple of Vithoba temple of Pandharpur, where so Pandharpur for Maharashtrians is a very important site because there is Vithoba temple is like one of the holiest sites in Maharashtra. So that temple was destroyed. He destroyed. Um, he also, I think, if I remember correctly, which is not in the essay, he destroyed a temple at on a fort called Vasantgarh, and actually he not just that he got a cow killed there on Vasantgarh. Now, if I remember correctly, this does not come in Masiri Alamgiri. So there are recently, like about 30-40 years ago, a few historians got more access to more farmans of Aurangzeb, and they translated into other language, and that's where you find a lot of this evidence. So from about 1665 to 1707, you see a lot of temples being destroyed. So there were temples destroyed in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad. There were temples destroyed in Maharashtra. And then there's a also so actually I'll say one thing, which is Jadunath Sarkar. So Jadunath Sarkar was a great historian. Obviously, this the defendants of this political motive theory do not particularly like him, but he has done an enormous amount of work. So he has
Yeah.
written a big like a series of like a few volumes, I think 5 volumes on history of Aurangzeb. In the third volume of that, there is actually um a list of temples that he destroyed, and the list is not exhaustive. Uh, which I mean, there are incidents even before Aurangzeb became the king. So even when he was stationed in Gujarat, he so if I remember correctly, this Chintamani Mosque, Chintamani Temple, I think. Yeah. So this comes in this text called Mirati Ahmadi, which is like a Chronicle of Gujarat, mostly Gujarat, where he basically, again, it's the same thing. I think this was 1645. He destroyed a temple and had a cow killed in it, like and turned, yeah, had a cow killed in it, desecrated. So from 1645 to 1707, the pattern is nearly consistent. I mean, it's not like there is a lot of change in his behavior. There is a small episode which where early on, immediately after he became the king in I think in 1658 or 59, he had issued a famous farman called as Banaras Farman, where he had said that uh, that no new temple should be built and old temple should not be destroyed. So that is often uh, touted as evidence that Aurangzeb was actually not as intolerant as he was made out. But there is a story to that, which I think we'll come to later. It's there in our piece, but yeah, uh, but in short, if I have to say, this is the list is really endless.
Yeah, so, and I think you've rightly put there. The list is endless. Now, I want to talk about something which is kind of, you know, I honestly, I'm very happy that you took this point on in the essay itself, where this entire claim about the number of temples he destroys. Now, I'll tell you, I forgot the name of the historian. I think he's also working. I think he's in the United States of America, and I've really से नाम था उनका, I forgot his name, and he also discussed this on the Brown Pundits podcast, and there's this
Mhm.
thing where you know as if I find this entire discussion on Aurangzeb and his temple the destruction to be, or demolition to be, sometimes reaching absurdities, like you know oh, XYZ books have written he destroyed so much, how can you take them seriously? I mean, the point is, okay, let us assume that we cannot take the actual numbers given by those people. Yes, a lot of times old books and all these things do have a habit of exaggeration, that I think anybody who has functioning brain cells will accept that. But to take that and then strawman it to only 12 temples are demolished, I mean, between 10, 12 temples and maybe thousands of temples, there might be some mid gap also, right? So it's almost as if that is not true, I can take it down to 12. Now, how does one work around this? So my question, Aditya, is that when we are analyzing the data, like I know, sometimes in historical data we say करोड़ों log the, kind of a thing is
Mhm.
always mentioned in multiple historical data. I get that, and I get the point that many people are trying to say. करोड़ों log the cannot be reduced to do log the, is also equally true. So why? So a friend of mine, he calls this he calls this straw man fact checking. So you literally create a straw man, and then you
Yeah.
fact check the straw man, and then you fact check the straw man and destroy the entire argument. Ergo, Aurangzeb was awesome. How do we deal with this?
I think the short answer is very difficult. I mean, I don't think one can deal with this in a scholarly way. My honest view is that, because what can you do? So I mean, we, so Kedar and I have spoken about this, and hopefully with another economist, who I don't know if he or she would want to be named. That's why I'm not giving the name. We have discussed documenting the list of temple desecrations, not for anything. It's, again, we don't like, not for any religious contemporary politics. I want to emphasize this. But what happens is, one, Eaton's paper has become the gold standard in academia for the list of temples that were destroyed during that period. So if you are, so there are papers written in other fields using data on temple, and I'll give you a simple example. Why might this data be? It's not like people care a lot about, always people care only about the religious angles. What happens is, as an economic question, you, when Eaton says, and I agree with him, that temples were centers of economic importance. So, uh, one could be interested in viewing or understanding what does a destruction of a place of economic importance do to, say, long run differences in economic trajectory of two, say, neighboring locations. Let's say you have Pune and Mumbai, and say, let's say Pune faced some religious violence, and today it's way behind Mumbai in economic outcomes. So can we attribute that to this conflict? So these people need not always be interested in the motive of what did Aurangzeb do. They can just but they need some starting point of, okay, let's look at places that faced a lot of temple desecrations and compare them to places that did not face a lot of temple desecrations. Now, how does one start here? So one goes to Eaton's database. Okay, here is a list of temples that were destroyed. Let's go to the map and map them with here and see what is the difference. Now, but so if the starting point is itself so, for the lack of better word, not particularly reliable,
Mhm.
then what can follow from it also becomes a bit uh, like hard to um trust. Which is, again, this is not the fault of a researcher. So I, as an economist, would Google up and find, okay, Eaton has a database. Now I don't have any reason to think that I, meaning anyone, like, has a reason to think that this database is seriously underrepresentative. So, and then this database becomes a good starting point for a lot of other research. But uh, so coming back to your question, then how does one counter this? I think the
Yeah.
only way to counter is that you build a database. That is the only way. You build a database, and then other people can counter it. They can say that, okay, these uh, claims in your data set are flawed. You claim here a temple was destroyed, but it was not. You so that but this is a very, very laborious work. I mean, that is the reason why I was saying that. So Kedar, I and another economist have thought of doing this, but it is a long project which requires a lot of resources, a lot of funding. It's not easy, but that is the only way. I mean, uh, and people are open about this. It's not, I don't think that if you present proper evidence, like, it, there is just no audience for this. There is audience. There will be some people who will not like it, but there will be people who care about scholarship.
No, so there's a very interesting line in the essay itself, and I want to read this. I'm gonna so bear with me. You
Mhm.
guys say on exaggerations for a moment. Let us even suppose that claims such as the emperor went to view Chittor by his order. 63 temples of the place were destroyed. This is Masari Alamgiri, page 117, are exaggerated. It is an admirable goal to have a more precise estimate of temples that Aurangzeb had desecrated. But a lower bound on this number is not particularly hard to obtain by examining the primary sources, especially since several sites of temples mentioned have been destroyed are publicly accessible. Therefore, to discredit the claims of Aurangzeb's bigotry by pointing out a few inaccuracies or exaggerations is counterproductive. Now, this is a very, very interesting line of thought that you've taken. So, if I'm not misunderstanding, what you're saying over here is basically, okay, as we concede the point that when people try to, it's always there, for bravado kind of a thing. Even if he has knocked him out in like 10 seconds, he'll be like, no, no, I knocked you out in 5 seconds, that kind of a scenario. But the
Yeah,
point is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say, that
yeah,
archaeology doesn't lie. So even in the list of temples that he talks about, maybe there are not 60 odd temples, but we know quite a few of them which belong to that list that, if you dig the archaeology, are clearly destroyed. So it's definitely not 12. That's what you guys are trying to say, right?
yes, absolutely. That now, whether it's realistically feasible or not, like whether we will be allowed to perform archaeological surveys at all these places, that's a separate point. But if you claim that in Chittor, when 63 temples were destroyed, is the claim, you say that no, it's not 63, it's zero, then for me the job is very easy. I have to produce evidence of five. And I don't think that is going to be very difficult. Like, there will be, you go to places, you find destroyed temples. It's not that rare. I mean, um, or you find constructions which bear. So it's very funny. Eaton, in one of his speeches or interviews somewhere, says that the mosques reuse the material from temples. Now
Uh-huh.
that's a very interesting euphemism. Like, I don't know what to say. I mean, sure, there, yes, indeed there was some reuse, but in, in case of Aurangzeb, that is. So where again, one has to go and get the archaeological evidence, and I don't think that is very hard to obtain. And archaeology, as you said, does not lie. Now, of course, again, there are people who don't believe that archaeology, or who just don't um don't even interpret evidence differently from the archaeologist itself. That's how I would put it. So an example of this actually is something I discovered, I think, a couple of days ago. It's a bit of a detour. It's not related to Aurangzeb, but I was watching a video interview of Shireen Mushwi. Now, I don't know if your audience would know about her. She's a very reputed historian of the same period, um, where so this interview was on Rajya Sabha TV, I think, in from 2016 or 2015 for Indian History Congress, where somehow the topic of Ayodhya came up, and where she said that amongst historians there has never been any debate about Ayodhya. Like, there's almost consensus. Uh, she didn't say, she wasn't explicit, but I think what she meant was that there is consensus that there was no temple uh, amongst historians. And then she said that from the Hindu side, there were people who came, and one of them was Dr. Ramesh, who was an archaeologist, and he also he said that actually the inscriptions found at the Ayodhya site were actually planted from somewhere else, is what he said in court. That's what Shirin Mushwi claimed. So, out of curiosity, I looked up the Supreme Court judgment, and pertaining to the parts of Dr. Ramesh, and I actually spent a lot of time reading the judgment. I mean, it's not very easy to read a 1,000-page
Yeah,
judgment.
it's a 1,000-page judgment, man. Tell me about it. I read it. I got so bored.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I didn't read it fully. I'm not saying, I just read the parts pertaining to Dr. Ramesh, and at least there they don't mention that Dr. Ramesh claimed that these inscriptions were planted from elsewhere. He actually, at least in the judgment, says there's parts pertaining to Ramesh say that this is a 12th century inscription indicating that there was a like from a temple. So, where exactly did things get lost in translation? Maybe I misinterpreted, or maybe Shirin Muswi misunderstood things. I don't know. But so archaeology, I mean, one would hope that archaeological evidence should be enough, but that's only a hope. Finally, there are people who will agree, there are people who will not agree, and no matter what evidence you bring, that's going to be the case.
No, but Kedar, the level of scholarship in India, मतलब इतना पतन हो चुका है कि the Gyanvapi one, where clearly पता चलता है बाहर से क्या है वो. I mean, मतलब it is so ridiculously obvious, but even there the denialism is there. So,
No, no, so
and
on Gyanvapi, there's no denialism, right? So it's a very interesting. See, like, I don't want to say insignificant temples, but because that suggests a hierarchy of sorts, which I fundamentally disagree with. I think all temples are significant to the extent that they are
absolutely,
places of worship. But let's say, by going by popularity, smaller temples which were destroyed, those would not make it to, say, the database of Eaton. And the big ones like Gyanvapi, where you, as you say, like, you go there and uh, you have to be crazy to still claim that this did not occur. So of course they say that it occurred, but then you get an interesting twist which to the story, which is what Eaton has done in his paper, where he says that one has to look at the Gyanvapi. So if I can I read out the part of the paper from the for your
Please do,
readers?
please do. The beauty of
So
a podcast is we have sufficient time, so please do.
yeah, so let's so I think he writes it. I mean, I like his phrasing. Of course, not the so yeah. It was against this. So okay, yeah, I found it. So in 1669, there arose a rebellion in Banaras among landholders. So he says that there was a rebellion, uh, and some of these rebels were suspected to have helped Shivaji escape from Agra. So as we call it in the piece, the most I would say remarkable episode in the Indian history would be Shivaji's escape from Agra. Um, and he says that it was believed that Shivaji's escape had been initially facilitated by Jai Singh, the great grandson of Raja Man Singh, who almost certainly built Banaras' great Vishwanath temple. It was against this background that the emperor ordered the destruction of the temple in September 1669. So Eaton, like, see, now it's very to a casual reader. This sounds very believable, right?
Hmm.
That Shivaji escaped from Agra. Um, Aurangzeb believed that people from Banaras helped Shivaji escape, and and in particular, Raja Jai Singh helped him escape, and therefore. The Aurangzeb got furious and he got the temples destroyed. But I mean, it's I don't know where does one start. I mean, Eaton is a reputed historian, so but so as we write in the piece, Shivaji fled in 1666. The temples were destroyed in 1669. 3 years. What was Aurangzeb doing in between? Now he was doing something else in between, which is actually Mirza Raja Jai Singh died in that period, and his son um Ram Singh became the king. Not just Ram Singh's coronation was attended by Mirza Raja by Aurangzeb himself. So in 1667, I think, or 1668 maybe, Ram Singh becomes the king, and Aurangzeb attends his procession, his coronation, and blesses him. Not so the blesses him is the part that comes from Masiri Alamgiri. But if I remember correctly, in Jadunath Sarkar's book about Jaipur, he says actually that Aurangzeb even put. I may be getting the reference wrong, so don't hold me for that. But I'm pretty sure it is that Aurangzeb put a tika on his forehead, which is one of the last known instances where he did this. So
Hmm.
he puts a tika on his forehead. So basically celebrates with Ram Singh. Then there is also a subsequent account of like warm dialogues between Aurangzeb and Ram Singh. So all of this happens between 1666 and 1669. And then one fine day, Aurangzeb decides to take revenge of Shivaji's escape. Like, how does one logically maintain this position? I don't know. But this is what has been argued, and it's even more preposterous if one looks at how it has like the context, the order in Masiri Alamgiri for the destructions in. So all of this came from Gyanvapi, right? You asked how does one deny that? So I told you how Eaton denies it, which is he claims that it was Shivaji's escape from Agra that was the reason why why Vishwanath temple was destroyed. It's, so to the once you want to build a theory, I mean, you find evidence. So that's the short way to put it.
So that takes us to the third point of your essay, and this is a very important point. I know I am saying it in a very weird way, but there's the Big Boss में एक वो line थी बहुत famous हो गई there's this female who says in Punjabi "तोड़ा कुत्ता कुत्ता साडा कुत्ता तोड़ा कुत्ता Tommy साडा कुत्ता कुत्ता" kind of a thing. And this is the problem when, I mean, some historians are historians, some are colonial historians, some are historians. And I mean, there has to be some standard, right, Aditya? Now here's the thing. Now I remember years ago when I had read Eliot and Dawson. So let me clarify here. I know where this line of argumentation comes from, the Marxist side, because Eliot and Dawson, in their foreword itself, very clearly say, look, you guys keep accusing the British did this, the British did that. Look what the Mughals did to you. I clearly remember reading Eliot and Dawson's foreword, and they mention that. And look, just because they wrote that one paragraph, I think each and every Marxist historian in India has literally taken that. And again, this is a straw man where, look, Dawson and Eliot said this. What has that got to do with everything else in that book? They are just stating the facts. Yes, Dawson and Eliot were apologists of the British Empire. Even I accept that. But when we are looking at the evidence of the Mughal court historians, what has that got to do with? So, Aditya, how do we solve this third part of it? Like Jadunath Sarkar, he becomes a good historian when he suits the ideological motives of one side. He becomes a bad historian when he suits the ideological motives of the other. I mean, how do we decipher the truth in such a scenario, Aditya?
So I mean, it's a great question. So there are two parts. So first is what is the standard to evaluating scholarship there, and I mean, on the matters of history, I would unhesitatingly say that Kedar is sort of my mentor, or I would say he is my mentor, and he told me, when we in the process of writing this piece, he told me multiple times a beautiful line by, so is it by R.C. Muzumdar or someone, I don't remember, where the line is that a historian is worth only the evidence he presents. So, you know, this all of this is about the parts you said, where look, Eliot and Dawson said this and blah blah blah. This is about interpreting their evidence. What is the contribution of Eliot and Dawson? It's to translate and bring it in front of us. Now, sure, they may have whatever motives they had. It's completely possible, and I agree that they were apologists of the British Empire. But what matters is what is the evidence behind their claims. If they claim that British did like, look at what Mughals did to you, and relatively we are much better, they would present evidence for against Mughals for that, and in favor of the Brits for that. Now, what all we have to evaluate is, are there evidences about Mughals true? Are there evidences about Brits true? Now, someone else will bring us evidence about what horrific things the Brits did, and when we put together all the evidence, an aggregate picture will emerge. So I think the first part of your question is, or answer to the first part of the question, which is how does one like have a standard. I think the standard is the evidence you bring. I mean, it is very interesting uh, because after we wrote the piece, there was some interaction on Twitter about this piece, where one person claimed that, this thing, there is even some document in Hindu scriptures which say that if you win a war against a different king, then you should destroy their temples, and there's a clear procedure. Now, I was a bit taken aback because I didn't know about this, and so I pressed this person to give the exact evidence, and the evidence was Eaton's speech, a YouTube video of Eaton's speech. Now we went to
Mhm.
the speech, and we went to the document that was quoted in the speech, and the document does not have any mention of such a prescription. So, what is the worth of a historian? It is the evidence. If you cannot, so would I claim that no Hindu scripture claims or prescribes demolishing temples? No, I wouldn't, because I don't know. But if you take a claim that XYZ document prescribes you to do this, then you better back it up. So it's all about evidence. And I mean, in today, So that is this the first thing. You bring evidence, and then in our piece, there is not one thing which we are not able to back by evidence. That is how it should be. Now, how does one find truth in this? So I think that question is really about how many are interested in finding truth. I think that the most of the problem is from that. People, because history unfortunately is so tied to the contemporary politics, that truth um, is a casualty in that.
Mhm.
So how does one find truth? I mean, we aggregate evidence. People from all sides will present the evidence that supports their theory, and we can then aggregate. So when it comes to political motives, we have uh, taken we have tried to present the evidence that about temple desecration, and we have taken the best of position that was or evidence offered by Eaton and the likes, and we think that there is no case to be made. I think that probably is the way to go.
All right. So in the piece, but I think only for fairness, I think I have to ask this question. I mean, you guys do mention it, but in one of the analogies, you yourself use the political motive analogy in the piece, right? At the at the end of the piece. So if I was to come back to you and say, but Aditya, you just wrote the entire first point dismantling how political motives should not be considered in such a serious issue, but then in the end you yourself are using a political motive, what would your answer to be
So
then?
this is absolutely true, and we were fully aware of this. So, which is why we are not saying that every demolition was religious. Our point is, look, when there is a political motive, it's very easy to find a story. Like it's you don't have to go too far. So I sort of expect. So I'll tell you the timeline. The So for the readers, I don't expect, our viewers, I don't expect everyone uh, to have read our piece. So this is pertaining to the point on this Banaras Farman, where Aurangzeb said that do not build new temples and do not destroy old temples. And our argument is that this order of do not destroy old temples is coming from a political motive, because Aurangzeb was consolidating power then. So what had happened was, this Banaras Farman is from 28th February 1659, and on 5th January 1659, so barely a month and a half before or 2 months before, there was a battle in Khajua between Aurangzeb and his brother Shuja, and Shuja fled to Banaras. And the argument we have is that to prevent the Brahmins from Banaras to help Shuja and like to help Shuja recover, um, Aurangzeb basically wanted to pacify the situation there, and that is why he gave this order. Now, could we be 100% certain? Of course not. Who is to say that this the political motive, uh, like it's 100% case of political motive? But you have to look at things in totality. In 1645, Aurangzeb, when stationed as a prince in Gujarat, destroys temple. When in Satara, he destroys temples. At tons of other places, he destroys temples before ascending to power. So Jadunath Sarkar's history of Aurangzeb, Volume 3, as I mentioned, he has there is um, like temple destructions by Aurangzeb. There are, so as I look at it right now, there's one in 1645, there's one in 1659, there's one in 1661. So there are several temple desecrations. And one can find more so there are desecrations that have happened before 1659. So is the story that Aurangzeb was a bigot before 1659, then for a brief period of an year or so he turned tolerant, and then again he turned bigot? That is the story, right? So so we are offering an alternative hypothesis, which is that look, this is the sequence of events which seems to tie very closely with the political motive. Now, and as you rightly asked, that so you're using the political motive when you suit, when it suits to you. No, we are not. I mean, we for Vishwanath temple, if you offer a convincing political story, yeah, maybe there was one. But the best story that Eaton offered is that Shivaji fled from Agra in 1666, and that's why temples were Vishwanath was destroyed in 1669. Now there are several loopholes here. A gap of 3 years, as opposed to that, we have a gap of 2 months. I mean, I think these are just very different stories.
Fair enough. Now, Aditya, let's now, because I think it's very important to take a few questions from the live viewers too, and we have some very interesting questions. So I'm going to start taking questions now.
Mhm.
So I'll take the name of the person in case there is one. So Shreyans Patel has asked, don't you think because the non-left in India, or right, he uses the word the right in India, keeps on criticizing good emperors like Akbar and Tipu, the left keeps on defending bigots like Aurangzeb and Khilji. Now you can disagree with the framing itself, and maybe you can say this framing itself is wrong. But how would you feel about this question?
So I don't have a view on. So his question supposes that Aurangzeb and Tipu were good rulers. I haven't read
No,
enough
his
history.
question supposes that Aurangzeb and
Oh, sorry,
Khilji were
Akbar,
bad
Akbar and
rulers.
yeah,
Yeah,
Akbar and
Akbar
Tipu
and
were
Tipu were good rulers.
yeah. So I haven't read enough history from their empires to know whether they were good or not. So it's very hard for me to take a view on whether the non-left, so to say, is unfairly criticizing some rulers versus others.
Also, इसमें एक कहानी में ट्विस्ट ला सकते हैं. It could be that the reason the left has started defending Aurangzeb till a certain extent is so that maybe we don't overanalyze what Akbar and many other Mughals did too. Could that also be a possibility?
Absolutely, I mean it's quite possible, right? Because so in Shah Jahan's era, for example, 76 temples were demolished in Banaras. This comes from Badshah Nama, I think. So, so I I think one has to sit and really go look at the evidence for each of this. For Akbar, I mean, from what I know very vaguely, is that there are two interesting halves to his life. First half, he was not known for particular form of tolerance, and the second half, he was reformed. But as I said, that and in case of Tipu, uh, I haven't heard of a lot of. So there is a science and technology aspect of Tipu for which he is somewhat praised, but there's also the religious side for which he's not particularly known for a lot of, for I would say, good things. So I don't know in what sense is the non-left wrong in criticizing Akbar and Tipu, but that's just because my lack of knowledge. So I wouldn't comment much.
All right. So another question is from Vivek Sinha. So obviously he
Mhm.
calls her Lady Teja because that's the name I've given her, Audrey. So he says Audrey claims that demolitions were more political rather than religious, but the act of desecration looks to be properly a religious one. Why why I think what they're saying is why the need to defend such acts would be what makes people defend such acts. Now that I think is very unfair. How can you psychoanalyze what Audrey is thinking? You're not her therapist, so I definitely won't expect you. But in general, don't you think this is a peculiar malaise, this habit of denialism and negationism? And don't get me wrong, I think negationism and denialism is practiced by both sides in India, albeit on different subjects. I think the left practices negationism and denialism on the record of Islam in India. And I think the non-left, in my opinion, practices, again, this is my opinion, this is not Aditya's opinion. So please don't attribute what I say to Aditya. But in my opinion, the non-left, in a very weird way, practices denialism or negationism, especially in the matter of caste in India. But how do we deal with this then?
So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you clarified that. I don't have the opinion that left practices denialism on Islam in India, because I don't have a view on Islam in India. I want to make it very clear. I have only and only a view on Aurangzeb's rule in India, and that's about it. Uh, so yeah, and why is so I haven't, I mean, as I said, that I wanted to restrict to scholarly work, so I have read Eaton's work. And why is he presenting this thesis of political motive? It's very hard for me to understand why. To me, the when it comes to Aurangzeb, the evidence is fairly clear, so he could have steered clear of that. So why didn't he, is I would say for him to answer.
All right. So again, this question is very interesting. Somebody, Manav Chandra, has asked this: Is Aurangzeb a normal Islamic ruler or an odd psychopath on religious rampage? If we were to compare his cruelties to previous and other Islamic rulers, like, this is actually a very interesting thing. So if we were to, compare rulers in terms of their, capacity of destruction, we would actually only know how to place Aurangzeb when we do a comparative analysis between all rulers, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we, so this is something that I don't know why it should be done. I, again, this is because these things have a lot of implications on contemporary politics, which is that I wouldn't say that somebody needs to do it. But if one does it, maybe something interesting could emerge. Maybe we will learn that Akbar was actually very tolerant and pluralistic king, and even
Exactly.
Shah, yeah, Shah Jahan and Jahangir were like essentially continued the same policies of tolerance. It is possible. I'm not saying it did happen or did not happen. I'm just saying if one does it systematically, maybe one will find a clear pattern. But these things are very very hard to do. I mean, one has to learn Persian, then decide. So Masiri Alam, so Jadunath Sarkar did tremendous work in translating a lot of this work into English. This is not all these state orders. How are these books were written in Persian, uh, or uh, or for state orders were all written in Farsi. So one has to translate all of them, and there was no Google Translate then where you would get first block. Like, it's just, so imagine the amount of work that someone like Jadunath Sarkar has done to bring forward so much of primary source material. Now one has to do that for Akbar and Jahangir, and as one goes back, it's the evidence is harder to find. So this is, I mean, I'm actually, so I went to the Hyderabad State Archives recently, and if one goes there, I mean, it's very hard. Um to just like sit with these volumes of farmans and get them translated. So it's, so yeah, someone should do it. Who will bring the funding for and scholars for that? I am not. And why should one do it? I'm not saying for politics. Again, why should one do it is for just for understanding how were different kings. I mean, uh, when it comes to conflict, like there are so since India, like Hindu Muslim conflict is um, very common in India. One view is that this is a clash of civilizations, that is, these two religions will never meet or see eye to eye. And the other is that no, we can exist in harmony, and we have done so. Uh, so, for both of these views, one scholarship would, more evidence and history would help. So, but yeah, one has to find scholars and find funding. I mean, funding is the real bottleneck in all of these things. You
All
hire,
right.
so I'll be a bit long-winded here, but like, you imagine a one full-time historian will need, say, 3 years of 3 to 4 years of full-time work to have some of these things translated. So just like you're looking at some, and then travel and everything, so you're looking at like a few 1 crore or something like that. So it's a lot of involved process.
So Harsha has asked, why should we not discuss Shezwarkar, Riyasatkar, and Purandare? Why only rely on Jadunath Sarkar?
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss Shezvalkar or anyone. I'm just saying for the topic that was of my interest or our interest, Kedar and I, like our arguments we could do using Shezvalkar, and we have discussed Setuma. We could do using Jadunath Sarkar, and we have discussed Setu Madhaura Pagdi. We didn't discuss GH Khare, but like it's not of I'm a Marathi myself, so why would I be biased against? I think the subtle undertone there is that why not discuss Marathi historians? And I mean, there's nothing against that. Setu Madhaura Pagdi we have discussed. We cited his work. GH Khare we haven't, but so of course we can. It's just the topic has to be there.
Fair enough. So, on Vivek Sinha has asked, apart from temple desecration, what other prominent farmans were issued that were uh, religious in nature by Aurangzeb? Did anything stand out to you guys when you were going through the farmans?
So this is definitely a question for out and out for Kedar. So I would say that you should have him on your show one day, because he like not just Aurangzeb, he can talk about a lot of history. But if I remember correctly, off the top of my head, there were farmans issued about say Diwali celebrations and jazia and things like that. So accounts and finance to even celebrations. But I wouldn't be able to like name the exact evidence, but those are all there in actually this History of Aurangzeb, Volume 3, about page 250, 262 to 80. So that is where you find. So, I mean, actually, I have this in front of me open, and like there is a section where Hindus excluded from public offices, Jagannath Sarkar, Hindu fairs put down. So these are separate sections where so Aurangzeb revived the same policy. So of uh, a very grand fair of this kind used to be held at a tank in the village of Malwa up to the 14th century. But Firoz Shah Tughlaq put it down with bloodshed. Aurangzeb revived the same policy in 1668, forbade such fairs throughout his dominions. That is what Jagannath Sarkar says. Now, I haven't verified the source that Sarkar has used, but you don't generally find Sarkar fabricating things like the way, yeah, anyway. So, you don't find Sarkar fabricating things. So, this would be true. So, there would be farmans like this. Now, this is not about temple desecration, but just general bigotry of Aurangzeb.
Fair enough. So, okay. So, before we wrap things up, Aditya, so is there anything else that you want to talk about? Any particular projects that you're working on? Anything else that is there? If you want to tell us about that.
Sure. So as I said, I mean, so Kedar, I and another economist, we are actually actively trying to understand the economic impact, if there was any, of religious conflicts in medieval or early modern India. I want to emphasize that this is not. Uh, we couldn't care less about the contemporary politics and its implications on that. So, but to understand the impact of religious conflict on economic divergence, we want a reliable data set uh, on the instances of religious conflicts, and so we are thinking of basically conjuring of funds from some sources, or I would shamelessly say that if there are people willing on your channel, if someone thinks this is a worthwhile goal and they want to contribute towards that, I mean, it would be great. So to build a data set of such violence so that we can examine uh, whether what is the cost, economic cost of these violence. But it remains to be seen how far one goes with this. But that's a project that we have thought of. We will do, Kedar and I. And then there is a bunch of exciting stuff that Kedar is doing. That I like one day. I mean, he is writing a book on forts. He's he is also he has a fantastic thesis uh, on the, it's not called the administrative system of Marathas, but it is more on the administration side of the Maratha Empire, and it's a very well of course he's a serious historian, so it's a very well researched piece. So I hope that turns into a book that some like people, viewers of your channel, would enjoy reading.
All right. So somebody, one last question. I think this is a very interesting question. So I'm just going to ask you this one. So somebody has asked, did Aurangzeb do anything good for his people? Did he have any redeeming qualities for the terrible things he did with respect to religion? Did you find anything good that he did?
I mean, anything good is a subjective thing, but I would say that uh, that he was a he was an insanely efficient king. I mean, so I have forgotten the source now, but there is, uh, I think Jadunath Sarkar only, or no, someone else. But basically, there's account that Aurangzeb paid very close attention to daily hearings in courts, and I mean, look at the man was on the battlefield at the age of 85. Uh, I hope all of us live until that age, but I'm not very confident that even if we do so, we will be able to be on a cricket field playing at the age of 85. And I mean, this man was like full on a battlefield. And he lived very frugally. I mean, when he died, there were clear instructions that the money be donated and everything. So to that extent, I mean, I am sure if one examines more, they will probably find some other good qualities. But come on, the man ruled over such a vast empire and fought so many wars, and like, so there are obviously several redeeming qualities in him as how he fought. I why why nothing came of it in the end, or rather, immediately after his death, the Mughal Empire started basically declining. Is I think he got embroiled in too many conflicts, but the sheer act of having the tenacity to fight these, I think, is something quite admirable. Admirable is probably the wrong word,
Fair
but
enough.
like, just the fact that he at that age he could fight those battles is something remarkable.
Yeah, I get what you're coming from. The thing with Aurangzeb is it's very hard to defend Aurangzeb. Best of luck convincing the Sikh community, because especially when it comes to the Sikh community, I mean, Aurangzeb has already, he is already quite known in the historical records of assassinating a Sikh guru too. So yeah, so that's what I say. You might spin yarns of apology around it. Best of luck doing that with the Sikh community. They're not going to accept it at all. And even in the historical circles, I know there is this whole back and forth. Not only is there back and forth with within the Hindu community and the Muslim community, there is another set of back and forth between the Sikh community and the Marxist historian community also. So like I always say, when it comes to Aurangzeb, best of luck on that one. Go convince the Sikh community. उनके गुरु की हत्या के बाद अगर आप बोलोगे कि he was a benevolent guy,
But I don't
convince
understand.
them.
But I don't understand why is there like, yeah, I think in case of Aurangzeb, there are, to the extent that there is possible with every human being. I mean, there are blacks and whites, but the sum total of it is very very clear. I mean, there's not a lot of ambiguity about his contributions uh, to things. So I actually don't understand.
No, I agree with you, Aditya, and I guess that's a whole point that as someone who I always talk about morals and ethics, and I think as a moral objectivist, I think we should not shy away from making moral judgments about figures from the past. We should not do that. I certainly don't, and to me it does not matter. Again, these are my views, not Aditya's, but whether it's the Hindu
No,
figure,
actually,
Jain figure, Buddhist figure. I mean, we
I,
should judge them. I have no problems.
I think we should judge. What's wrong in judging? I mean, and I agree with the view that we should not apply today's standards to those times. I mean, there's a today, like that is a completely was uh, so on issues like gender and all, the society here has evolved massively. So if we go back to 17th century and evaluate, say, Shivaji and Aurangzeb on gender issues, they will all come out probably uh, as absolutely horrible. But the comparison we should have is not Shivaji versus Aurangzeb from today's standard, but Shivaji versus Aurangzeb from that standard. Was so Aurangzeb's contemporary king was Shivaji. Now, were they equally religiously equally tolerant or intolerant? That is a comparison to be made. And I think that judgment we should not shy away from. What's the point of shying? Like, what's the point? So we should only say good things. I don't see what's the point of scholarship and research if that's the only thing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I guess we'll wrap things up now. Aditya, once again, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast and sharing your views. I know this is a contentious subject. I don't know why it is contentious, but I have never understood why the truth is contentious. But I guess everything is politicized these days. So I really, first of all, appreciate you coming on the podcast, and also appreciate you writing that essay with Kedar. So on behalf of the viewers and listeners of the Cārvāka podcast, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Kushal, for having me. And I must profusely apologize for delaying this for so long. But it was great talking to you and explaining some of the things or our positions better from this outlet. Hope this was useful to your viewers.
This is going to be really liked by my viewers, because my viewers always look for serious arguments. So guys, time to wrap today's discussion up. So I'll just leave you guys with my closing comments. Again, these are my comments, not Aditya, so always remember that. So as you see today's t-shirt, I'm wearing a t-shirt. So first of all, please support the Cārvāka podcast. Go and buy the Cārvāka podcast merch on kushalmehra.com/shop. And I want to say this, and these are my views, and I've always said this a long time, even before on the podcast. Look, as far as I'm concerned, Aurangzeb is a hill I'm willing to die on. I can tolerate a lot of mental gymnastics that are done in Indian socio-political discourse. This is something I find really abhorrent, that it's everything is mired in politics in India. I don't know why. Look, history is a record of events that, when we look back today, we're going to have problems with it, and we have to deal with it as human beings. You cannot have truth and reconciliation on the basis of lies. It never happens. It never happens on the basis of lies. So we should never shy away from knowing the truth, and we should also not shy away from calling out those people who blame people today for somebody's some just because they're born into a community that had done some bad things in the past. That's not how we deal with things. We just look at the past, we judge it the way it is, and then we move forward. So I'll request all of you, have an open mind. When you read history, yes, we're bound to know many bad things happened in our past, not just from the Mughal history. Even inside the Hindu history, we'll find things that we may not enjoy. The point is not taking it out on people today. The point is learning from them and becoming better people in the process. So I hope you do that. So I'll wrap today's discussion on that. And once again, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your comments. I have left a link of the essay that Aditya and Kedar wrote in the Open Magazine in the description of the podcast. So it doesn't matter if you're going to be watching this on YouTube or listening to this on SoundCloud, Spotify, and all the audio portals. There will be the link to the essay. I will highly recommend you guys to go and read the essay too. And then the sources that Aditya and Kedar have mentioned, you can go and read them and double check them too. And if you find any flaws, you can go out and reach out to Aditya on Twitter and contact him on Twitter, and maybe he will answer them too. But try and have an academic discourse. Don't abuse, don't attribute motives, do not do those things. So once again, guys, thanks a lot for watching or listening, whenever, whichever medium you're using. Please support the Cārvāka podcast, become a member on YouTube, or subscribe on Patreon, or buy the merch, or send your donations through UPI. I try to have civilized discussions on contentious subjects. Please support this venture that I have started for the last three and a half years. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, take care.